Okay. Should we get started, Joan?
We have all these friends with us today. It's so great.
I know. It's wonderful. Thank you all for joining us on Designers at Home. We're here this morning with Joan Quinn. Joan, you look absolutely beautiful.
Thank you.
So we have a nice crowd this morning. And, Joan, it goes back so far. I'm trying to think, but I think you and I originally met in the early 1970s.
I think we go way back. Was it with Jody Jacobs?
Yes. Jody was the society editor for the LA Times then, and I met you through Jody. And anyway, so it's great, I don't know, some 50 years later to be here with you. And I'm thrilled.
Mark. We're icons.
Pardon?
We're icons.
Yes, I know. And I got a really lovely note yesterday from Clifford Miller, who said, "Oh, I'm so excited you're going to be talking to Joan. She's just one of my favorite people." And he went on and on. So it was really lovely to hear.
I was happy to hear from Clifford too. He always did the flowers for my TV show.
Oh, he's so incredibly talented, isn't he?
And then we talked about old Los Angeles society. He said, I was connected to Betsy Bloomingdale and Edie Wasserman and Harriet Deutsch and that whole group. He used to do, David Jones used to do the flowers. And then Clifford said, I started doing the flowers.
Yeah, he's a lovely guy, major talent. So you're a Los Angeles native. When I was a kid growing up, I think your father was in the race car business.
My father was promoting races. Yes, he owned a car at Indianapolis Speedway, which they won in, I think it was 1952, with Troy Ruttman. And then he had another car the next year with Parnelli Jones, and they won. So, and then he was promoting races at Gardena, and that's where Billy L. Bankston used to race his motorcycles.
And was that your introduction into the world of art?
Well, Billy was my introduction, kind of, because I had gone to school with a ceramist named Dora Delarios. She was in junior high school with me at Audubon, if you can believe that. And I went on to Westlake School, and she went on to Dorsey. And we met up again when we were graduating from high school. I was working at Desmond's on Stalker and Crenshaw. And Dora was working in the design department downstairs. They would do the window displays. And Billy L. was working there too. So they had a very, very contentious relationship. They were not friendly at all. But they used to have to me to get costume jewelry because I ran the little costume section at Desmond's. And so that was my acquaintance with Billy. And then when Billy found out my father was a race promoter, we became friendly again at USC. I was in journalism. I took ceramics. I took art classes. And Billy was there, and so was Ken Price. So it started our careers together.
Oh, that's great. So you and your husband, Jack, have been very supportive of the arts, over the years, and you have twin daughters. And are they as involved in art as you've been?
They love it. They love it, and they were raised with all the artists. I think if you talk to them, those artists were just regulars at our house all the time. They grew up with them. When the girls were just born, Billy L. was over here with John Altoon, and Kenny Price was over. And I remember when the girls were born, Billy L. gave them a set of twin dentos, maybe about 10 inches each, 10 inches square, and they were pink. So one was for Amanda and one was for Jennifer. We still have those hanging on the wall here.
That's great. So I see behind you a couple of paintings here. You mentioned the one to your left is David's. It's a Hockney.
It was a little print that David gave me years ago. Yes. he was working on his computer. It's a colored print that he made and hand drew around and gave to me. And the one behind me, the red and yellow one, is a Ed Ruscha, which was made in the late 60s in Paris. It was a pear, that's the steak in the center of that yellow dish. And then the other one, which I don't know if you can see it or not. Let's see, it's the other way. Let me see if I push this around. It's the other way, it's a potato. And he did these two collages called Steak and Potato. And they were recently loaned to the Oklahoma Museum, where they did a show of Ed's work.
Oh, great. So you just had a show recently that it just closed a week or so ago, didn't it, at the Bakersfield Museum?
It was fantastic, Mark. The Bakersfield Museum of Art took over the whole museum, and Rachel McCullough Wainwright was the curator, who talked to me many, many times about having a show there, and I kept saying no. And she finally convinced me, and she took up. She was phenomenal in the way she explained our collection, because our collection was not bought with light and space and these different ideas to collecting, because we were just buying art from our friends and supporting them. So when Rachel took it in to the museum, we said yes, but we wanted this extension of education. We wanted to make sure that she brought the schools in and the college, and she did. And they had a lot of outreach in Bakersfield. They had a fantastic support from the wonderful company, from the Resnicks, who live just up the hill from us here. So they're in the Central Valley. And, you were talking about auto racing. My father used to promote a Thanksgiving Day race right outside of Bakersfield. So we were kind of connected to that community. Visalia, Hanford, that whole area. My dad used to also promote at Sacramento. So he would come down into that Central Valley and do PR for his races.
A lot of people think Bakersfield is just a place to pass through, and it does have a wonderful museum. There are other, I just recently discovered that there's, a great Frank Lloyd Wright house there, the Alvin House, right?
Exactly, and the curator of that is David Coffey. We had these wonderful little trips that I would plan. They would leave Los Angeles because it was only like an hour and 45 minutes to Bakersfield. And they would go to the museum. Then they would have an iconic lunch at either Luigi's, which was there for 100 years, or at the Basque restaurants, because that was great Basque territory. So there was the Pyrenees and a couple of different Basque restaurants. Then they would meet David Coffey, who, by the way, lives in a Neutra house. And so that's another surprise in Bakersfield.
Right.
There are two Neutra buildings there. So they would pass by the old Woolworths, which was still open with its counter, if people remember Woolworths, and then go to the Alvin House, and David Coffey would take them through.
So how many pieces were in the show?
Oh, boy. That's a good question. I think over 100. She grouped them so beautifully. And then in the front room, there was a personal room. And that was the thing. It was more of a personal kind of collection. We had a personal room, had a stick necklace by Chuck Arnaldi. And there was a camera bag that Billy Al had painted with Louis Vuitton insignias on it, and different things that artists had given us over the years. So I didn't want it to be like this, like people collect today, just to have a huge painting in their house, even if they don't know anything about it. It's just trendy. And we weren't trendy. We were, of the time, I would say. And so that's what I was so happy that collection and that museum actually showed. It showed that the pieces were small and intimate.
Oh, great. Um, you know, I think I read that there's been over 300 artists and friends that have painted your portrait. Is that correct?
Yes, you're
That's
right. We had a
amazing,
big
Joan.
collection of portraits.
So,
Those portraits were shown at Delray at the Carnegie Museum, and they were shown in Santa Ana at the college and Brand Library in Glendale. Um, Actually, Rachel Wainwright had a hallway of portraits in connection with this. And she also had a video with that Aaron Ketcheli, who's the director of our archives, put together this collection of artists who I had interviewed. So there
right.
was a video of all these artists.
So, can we talk a little bit about all these? Well, we're not going to go through 300 portraits.
No, we're not. Oh, but you know, the museum, Rachel and her husband Henry Wainwright. It's a hard one to say. Wainwright, who's an engineer, are taking the Boston show taking the Bakersfield show to Boston. So it'll be showing at the Armenian Museum in Boston, opening June 16th. And with that will be another special room, not the personal room, but a room of portraits by Armenian artists only. So it will have this connection to the community and to the Armenian community. And that is when I talked about education and loving to have children come into museums so that they feel comfortable. Aaron and my daughter Amanda have mentored, and Rachel as well, have mentored these two art people, Gina Gregorian and Natalie Varbibian. And they put together a room of portraits only by Armenian artists. So they're learning how they have to make wall tags, how they have to interview the artists, how they have to research the dates, which is a fantastic thing because they're both art majors. One's in fashion and one's in art.
Great. And you're a trustee of this Armenian museum in
I am, and we're very proud of that space.
So you also, I read, have, I know you've championed women's rights for many, many years. And I read that you're on the executive committee of the Armenian International Women's Association.
I did. I am, and I still am, and I love that organization. We support a group in Armenia called the Women's Support Center, and we've raised money to build homes for abused women because, like all those former Soviet countries never talked about abuse or drunkenness or
right.
Any of the issues that we're dealing with today. And that Women's Support Center in Yerevan actually deals with those women. They bring the women in and they take care of the families and they give them technical skills so they can go out into the community on their own.
Oh, well, that's really wonderful.
Very close to me. Close to me.
So these
I digress because I have this thing that you wanted to talk about.
Okay. Well, let me see. So tell us about a couple of these portraits.
Well, where should we start? Let's start. How about this Mapplethorpe?
Oh, okay. Well, that's my absolutely most favorite portrait I've seen of you, and it's one of my favorite photographs ever.
Is that right? I picked the right one?
Oh my God, Joan, it's just incredible. You guys, you can Google it, and if you Google Joan Quinn Mapplethorpe, this photo will come up. It's an absolutely magnificent photo. So how did that photo come about?
We were doing a fashion shoot. I was doing an interview with Pat Vale, who was the daughter of Seaman Sheps, and we were doing it for interview. And I wanted to use a great photographer, of course, and we went to Mapplethorpe studio. We put Seaman Chef Pat came and put all these jewels on all over the front, and the dress was done by Christophe Demenil, the famous family of the Demenils from Texas, the oil people. And Robert came in and put me on a pedestal in a chair, and then started making us laugh. And he was way down low and photographed up like that, which when I was interviewing Ann Miller, we were in the studio and she said, "Joan, get those cameras up. Don't photograph up my nose. Photograph down my nose."
Right.
But Mapplethorpe was way down low, and he was fantastic. And that is a very happy photograph.
And show us another one here.
Oh, you know what? I love this one of Andy.
Yeah.
Because Andy and I used to go to parties so much in New York, and it was a really special time being in New York with him, because he always had an entourage of people. But we had alone time. We used to go to Mass at St. Vincent Ferrer on 65th and Lexington. And he knew my girls, and he always said, "Now make sure those girls go to church all the time." It was had a very religious side that no one knew about.
Yeah, I don't think many people would think of Andy Warhol and going to a Catholic church.
Exactly. And we used to stay at the Mayfair House, which was on 65th and Park. And so this church was on right around the corner from him. He lived on 66th in a beautiful townhouse that I just saw went in for sale. I don't know, 30, 40 million, up $50 million right now. And he, but I went up, he never let anyone in his house. It was always very private. You could go to the door and meet him maybe and see his kitchen. But Jed Johnson, one of his boyfriends and close friend, and who was a director of some of the films, took me upstairs to Andy's bedroom. And we sat on the floor and talked. We leaned against the bed. It was a canopy bed. And there was a Liechtenstein over the fireplace of a mirror, which was so great. And then Andy and I used to collect jewelry together. So Jed said, "You know what?" And I said, "What?" He said, "There's bags of jewelry underneath this bed." And I said, "You're kidding." And he said, "Up above the canopy, there's bags of jewelry." So we had a good laugh, and we left before Andy came home.
So what are you wearing today, Joan?
I'm wearing these badges that were made for the Bakersfield Museum. And it's a portrait of Jack and me by Billy L.
Oh, that's great.
Bankson was doing a portrait of me, and he said, "I can't do a portrait of you without Jack." So he put these two funny little eyes peering over me.
Oh, that's sweet. So, you've been so fortunate. You've had just amazing friends, from Andy Warhol, David Hockney, Divine, Jean-Michel Basquiat, John Waters. And, I also wanted to mention, I don't think we got a chance to do this. For over 35 years, you produced a show and hosted the Joan Quinn Profiles.
I did. And you know how I got into that was because of Andy.
Really? Okay.
First of all, my camera was always in my hand because Andy said, "Take your camera with you everywhere." So I had an Instamatic. David Hockney always used to say, "Not another photograph, Joan." And he would laugh about it. In fact, David's in Normandy right now. He has two exhibitions, one opening in Istanbul and one opening in Cambridge in England. And he was here in LA last week he was here very quietly for a few days. I mean, I say 5 minutes, and I got to see him for 5 minutes, but that was about it. but he's back in Normandy and he's painting again. And I just got a email last night that he's great and everyone's really happy back there. He's got his friends around him and he's thriving. He's a phenomenon. He is our artist of the century. I mean, I think he's just fantastic and he knows what to do and how to do it to make people understand art and to love being a part of art, just being a part of it. It just makes you so alive.
Yeah, his work is extraordinary. Now, how did you feel about Andy's work?
No, that's not fair. we don't have any of Andy's work. Not fair. We have a couple of pieces. We have a couple of pieces of Andy's work. I have a lot of little things that Andy signed, interview magazines and little pieces of knickknacks. But sorry to say, Jack and I didn't think much of it at the time. We never bought anything. We were just very, very close.
Oh. So, going back to the interviews, Joan, I remember I loved the interview that you did with David Hockney. And that was, I think that was quite an old interview, but it was absolutely marvelous. But I have to say one of my favorites that you had done was the one with John Waters.
Well, John was very close. I have a book here. Let me get it for you.
Okay.
John was very close to Divine.
Yes.
He made all of those movies. And John, at that time, wasn't giving very many interviews.
Right.
And when I asked him, Divine had already passed away. And when I asked him to do the interview, he said, I'll only do it for you because you were so nice to Divvy. And Divine used to stay with us. My kids were raised with Divvy here. He used to sleep on the couch downstairs because he couldn't walk up the steps. He was so big. And he would have his midnight rendezvous out in the back by the patio and at the pool. God knows who was coming up there and meeting him late at night. But we were close to West Hollywood. We still are. And he loved it here. So John was very kind. And he's now doing a book tour because he's going to be in Boston when the show opens in June 16th. He's going to be doing his book signing there.
Wonderful. So the series that you did, the Joan Quinn Profiles, how do people, are those on YouTube? How do people access those?
I think they are all on YouTube. Yeah, I think they're all on YouTube, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, for everybody watching, they're just absolutely fascinating. And as you can see, Joan is a great interviewer, so I encourage you to watch them.
Will I interview you? What were you doing, Mark? What were you doing when we were meeting? What were you doing?
You mean when we first met?
Yes.
Well, I was just out of college at the time and, trying to get a business established and, starving to death like a young starving artist. And it took
That's what Clifford Miller said. He had just come here when he was 24 and was just starting his business too. Yeah.
So it was tough. I wasn't, I kind of knew what I wanted to do. I just didn't know how to go about it. And, this is all before the days of the internet and social media and so forth. And, I didn't really know. I wasn't very good at self-promotion. But, I had, like we talked about, Jody Jacobs. I had wonderful people like that in my life who were just generous enough to promote me and make the right introductions. And that was, I've always been so grateful for people like that in my life. So,
but I think that's why we're here. We're here to help other people. And that's why I love having the artist and introducing him. Jack was a fantastic mentor in that relationship, in that realm, I should say, because he made relationships with the legal community. He would have the artwork in his office and he would invite lawyers up for cocktails and do meetings. And this art was always on the wall, and those people were exposed to the art. Just like when you're collecting, you know, people now want to buy what's going to be more expensive, what's going to sell at auction in 10 years or 5 years or 5 minutes. You know,
Right.
It's like they don't want to wait. We've been collecting for 50 years or accumulating, let's say. And people have to go out and go to art galleries, go to museums and look around and then buy something that maybe nobody else likes, but that speaks to them. You know,
Right.
You've got to look at it every day. I have a Rouget Hollywood on my, just above where we're talking. And I look at that every day and I just go, the Hollywood Hills and Ed Rouget. It's so great.
Well, and it means something to you too.
Yes.
Yeah, you're not.
But that's why they have to buy something that means something to them.
Yes, yes. I think that's great advice for people who are, you know, they don't know how to get started buying their first piece of art. I remember my first piece of art I bought probably in the very early 70s from Kimberly Davis at the LA Louvre Gallery. And
we love Kimberly.
Yeah. We had her as a host on the show, probably about a year ago. She's just lovely. But she had sold me this Robert Motherwell sketch on craft paper. And it's just, you know, it meant so much to me. And I think at the time, you know, I think I paid, $1,200 for it. But I had it until, unfortunately, I lost my home in Santa Barbara in the mudslides 4 years ago, and that was one of the pieces. But it's been one of my favorite pieces that I had, and I loved it more every year. It just meant so much to me. And
so you bought something that, bought something that you liked. But going back to also at the time when you said you were looking for a place, we were all very connected at that time. You were connected with other designers. I know Raymond Lee, who is a fantastic person who started Paulette, and he designed it with Tony Machado. And Raymond Lee used to do a lot of the styling for Interview magazines when Greg Gorman and Eugene Pinkowski and Matthew Ralston would come to do photos. Raymond was one of the stylists, but everyone was friendly, you know. So you had friends in your business. The artists here in Venice were all friendly. We went out in groups and we supported each other.
No, I think that's so important. And I love your comment on mentoring because it's one of my favorite subjects. I speak at UCLA. I'm a guest speaker there, and I talk to the design community there. And I try and encourage these people and give them advice that they're not going to get in school, and give them practical advice. And it's really very rewarding and very satisfying that, you know, through many years of success and failures, that you can share that with other people. And it's great that you've been able to do that with artists, and that you and Jack were so supportive of artists who at the time were just struggling to make it, you know, day to day.
Every time I wrote something, or every time I had a chance to do something, I would include an up-and-coming artist or an artist of some way, so that their work would get out to the public. Because I just think, like you said, sharing that and bringing attention to it is so important. It's the same way in the music industry and classical music. I heard Thomas Addis's new piece that he wrote about not Don Juan in Hell, but he wrote something for the Philharmonic. And the music was so beautiful, and it's contemporary, and yet it was so classical. You could hear it 100 years from now.
Oh, lovely! I don't know that piece. So
it's really beautiful. They just played it.
So, are there any upcoming young artists in Los Angeles that you would mention, or that you have recently seen their works?
I've seen a lot of work.
Uh-huh.
And there are a lot of artists upcoming. And I think that's the mystery. I think you have to go out and find yourself. Downtown, there's the Night Gallery, there's Nicodem, there are a lot of galleries that are young and new. Various Small Fires on Highland. She always has a lot of great artists, and she has a gallery in Korea. So you get this different kind of feel. There's so much out there. There are so many things out there, and you have to just get out and find them and enjoy them.
Well, that's great advice. That's how I've learned about art, is just by going to galleries, by just exploring. And downtown is a lot of fun. It's great to wander around there. It's the area around SciArt and the Worth Gallery and so forth. There's just so many places down there.
Yeah, Hauser Worth, and they have a great restaurant. And
right. Yes.
The whole area where you said SciArt is really good. Where Nicodem is, it's in a building with 3 or 4 different galleries. So you get to move from up and down and sideways, and it just opens your eyes.
Right. So another photograph done of you was done by the American photographer George Herrell.
Ah, that's fabulous.
I know, and that's one of your favorites.
This is one of my favorites.
Right. And when was that taken?
George Harrell was the most wonderful, fantastic. It was like such an honor to be in his studio. I remember we were doing a shoot for French Vogue, and I was writing the story and coordinating it with celebrities. And we had Paula Prentice and we had a couple of other people coming in. We had a young up-and-coming star. We had established stars, and then we had up-and-coming. And I had this one young girl who was late, who didn't like her clothes, who was an absolute upsetting kind of person to any photographer. And George Herald just took it in stride, and we waited and waited. And he said, "Joan, sit up there. I'll take a picture of you while we're waiting." So I sat on the chair that he had. He took a light and threw it behind me. One light that you see how beautiful it is, snapped it and said, "Okay." And I said, "George, you only took one shot." And he said, "But I got it." And I went, "Oh, please, please." So he took another one, and then he sent me the photograph to the house, wrapped in purple paper, purple tissue. It was beautiful, with a note saying, "I told you I got it." And that was his first shot.
And is that the one that you just showed us the photo of?
That's the one you saw, exactly. So, that's the one. And people, other photographers idolized him. He was an idol. And I remember Eugene Pinkowski said, "Can I come to the shoot?" And I said, "I don't think Mr. Harrell wants anybody in the studio." And he said, "Please let me come. I'll sweep the floor. I'll keep the studio clean just so I can be there to watch how he works."
Oh, what a thrill. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the upcoming show you have in La Jolla, and let's tell everybody about this, because this is, I think, exciting.
Actually, that's what this is. This is called Timeless, and this is another fabulous photograph. I love this. I collected watches, and Helmut Newton knew that. And this is our magnolia tree in the backyard, and he had me put my hand up there with the watches, and he took the photograph. And so the Athenaeum in the center of La Jolla. Yes. I think it's on, I have to tell you what street it's on right now. It's on Wall Street, and they are opening on Saturday, tomorrow, May 7th at 5:30 with a reception. And then it's open all through the month of May to June 4th. And it will be like 50 portraits, just what you saw in this fold out, but they'll all be in black and white. So it's like very unique, and it's curated by Erin Ketjelly, and she's taken from the collection black and white photographs, sculpture, different kinds of work.
And how long is this?
I'm so excited to see it because the Athenaeum is like a little jewel. It's just like a jewel box.
So, and when is the opening?
Saturday the 7th at 5:30. And La Jolla is very close. It's as close as Bakersfield was.
Right. So that's tomorrow.
Yes, it is.
Well, I wish I could be there. That's wonderful. So
I think we're going to have a lot of friends. We're very excited. A lot of the artists have called Alexo, who did the portrait of me behind me with the hands like this,
right,
at the Carnegie Museum. He said, I can't wait to see my photograph. I'm going to come down on my motorcycle. And we're like, oh my gosh.
Oh. And how long is this show going to be running?
It's running till June 4th.
June 4th. Okay. Well, everybody, you're going to have to go down to La Jolla, make a little trip to see this because it'll be terrific. So, Joan, tell us what's in the future for you, Joan Quinn?
I hope a long life of happiness. I love my grandchildren. My grandchildren are growing up so fast. They're 13 and 10, Georgia and Paloma. And right now, it's just a thrill to see how all of a sudden, they're big girls, and they'll be at the opening. They came to Bakersfield. They're going to be in Boston. And I hope they remember this. I hope this is what we're doing is going to open doors for a lot of young people.
I think you've opened so many doors for people, Joan, over the years. I think it's really admirable. So, we could probably go on for hours discussing some of your experiences and stories, and I'd love to know more, but we're going to run out of time.
Let me just tell you the reason we got connected with the Athenaeum was because of Zandra Rhodes, because I curated a show of hers in San Diego in La Jolla, and she became very friendly with the people at the Athenaeum because she was living down in Solano Beach for a while, and that's how that happened. We've got one of her new black and white portraits of me in there.
Oh, that's great. I had no idea she was living in Southern California.
She was living there for quite a while with her partner, and she did a lot of the sets for the San Diego Opera. So she gave to the community as well.
Wonderful. So what else would you like to add, Joan?
I think that I didn't want to forget that because I thought that was so important to the community down south. We
wonderful.
Talked about the Central Valley and the architecture and all the icons things we can remember that are still in place in the Central Valley. And then in La Jolla, the museums have been renovated, and they have so many interesting things down in San Diego and Rancho Santa Fe. That whole area is very interesting.
Yeah, well, people should explore,
Exactly.
It's
part
great.
of life. Part of life.
Yeah. It just makes you richer and makes your life more full.
Yes, Mark, and you know that. You've been great about doing that.
Anyway, thank you, Joan, so much. I just can't thank you enough. I just adore you. And
I'm so glad. Thank you for doing this, and thank you for bringing to the attention all of what we've been doing.
All right. And all of our guests listening, make sure you get to La Jolla to see this show. It's just gonna be wonderful.
Thank you.
Anyway, thank you so much, Joan.
Bye
bye.
1 second, my show is. Sorry, my client
So,
does a.
Well, everyone, I'm sure you enjoyed today's show. Joan is just a treasure, and I can't thank you enough for joining us. We have, over the last 3 years, had a show almost every other week, every 2 weeks. And we're now going to be doing them monthly. as time permits. And we'll be announcing the next show upcoming, and we'll have another wonderful guest. And I look forward to you joining us. So thank you again, and goodbye. Bye, Joan.
Bye.